In our society, we all must learn. There has been plenty of research made on this topic. There are plenty of videos on YouTube about learning, how to learn. But if you want to save some of your time, save hundreds of hours in fact, I'm providing you today with a video about learning with all of the information that you need in order to become a master of learning. This will not only be useful for beginners, but also for experts. I can guarantee that anyone that follows what I will provide here will be able to improve in their learning. Let's start by the basics of learning. In order to learn efficiently, you need to first of all live a healthy life. You need to sleep well. A good night's sleep will improve your learning capacity by a lot. You also need to figure out the best environment possible for your learning. Now, not all of us are fortunate enough to be able to build their own environment in a way that they want. Some of us are stuck in some kind of a life with a special environment that we cannot change. In that way, the best way to deal with it is to simply adapt to it. But there will probably be some things that you can change. One of these is the air that is in your room. The temperature is also important. It should be in a range with which you are comfortable, but the air is even more important. The air has to be balanced in oxygen and carbon dioxide. If you're in a close space for a long amount of time, the carbon dioxide will be increasing in volume, and actually it will affect your cognitive state, your mental capacity in a negative way. You will have less of your brain power. And the best way to deal with that is to often open up your windows and let some fresh air enter the room. While you're studying, you will also have other sensations, such as hearing. And here is where comes music and noise into play. With music, it's quite tricky. There has not been many studies made, but from my personal experience and from all of the sources that I listened to, I can say definitely that music will not boost your learning capacity. What it will do is make the time go by faster. It will make you secrete more dopamine. It will make you feel better. But it will not increase your learning. What can increase your learning are some anti-noise headphones if there is a lot of noise that is playing with your focus. Or you can put on some black, white, brown noise, basically any noise that is monotone that does not change. This will help you focus by a lot. While music itself, it can help you enter the flow state. But one interesting thing about it, the flow state itself, is that it is not that easy to reach. Of course, it is comfortable to be in it, but it should be something like a nice addition to your life. If you happen to reach it, good for you. If you don't, what's the most important thing is to simply focus, take your time and learn and go through a little bit of discomfort. And in fact, if you do the things in the right way, you will learn the same amount, maybe even more, without that flow state. I've also talked about your health. And next to sleep, a right environment, also physical activity and food comes into play. It is best to move around at least a little bit, and you have to change positions at least once every hour. As for food, you need to try to eat healthy and try to limit the amounts of insulin spikes that you get. You can also use supplements to boost your cognitive capacity, but you should only do that if it's advised by doctors or if you have tested it out yourself and you know that some of the supplements actually help you. As for something like caffeine that comes from coffee, this will help your focus a lot, and almost every one of us can consume some. But it is not necessary. Being hydrated, drinking enough water is more important than any other things. If possible, try to make your study space, your learning space, as ergonomic as possible. Try to include some good chairs, good tables, something that would help you with your posture. And also, if you can, use some technological tools which will help your learning if used in a proper way. But some other things like a smartphone can distract you a lot. So I would suggest to move it somewhere else, or at least put it in do not disturb. Leave it with facing down on the table. Or if you have to use it, again, keep the do not disturb mode, the silence mode, and maybe change the luminosity or the blue light that this phone is emitting, just so that your brain would be able to associate this change and interpret it as seeing the phone as a object for work instead of entertainment. Now that we are done with creating your optimal learning environment, let's move on to the strategies of learning itself. The very first thing that I want to emphasize on is the topic of prior knowledge. The prior knowledge will help you in any case. By prior knowledge, I mean that you simply need to get a broad understanding, just some knowledge of the topic, of the thing that you're learning before you actually start putting your time towards it and trying to memorize it, trying to learn it. If you do that, the next learning steps will become much easier, since your brain already will have created a sort of a foundation of this new thing that you are learning. And it will be able to connect all of the small details together way faster and in a way more efficient way. Let's say that you are done with your prior knowledge seeking, and now you still cannot simply read through or just practice your learning. Now, there's one more thing that I want to mention in this video, is that I'm focusing more on a mental learning, of a learning that resembles studying, not learning how to do something physically, because this type of learning, it mostly goes entirely through practice. And in order to learn something, to do something that is physical, you simply need to practice over and over again in order to master. Going back to the next topic after prior knowledge, which is chunking. when you have your prior knowledge on that topic, which by the way, you can gain by watching videos or simply going on ChatGPT and trying to get some information, or if you already listened to a lecture, then just remembering what you learned from it, or what you already know before any of these things. Well, then you need to proceed with chunking, which is dividing your information that you need to learn into multiple parts. Something that is very, very important to know is that a lot of books of information that will be provided to us is already put in a way that was beneficial for the creator, but all of us are different. And I suggest to you to first of all quickly skim through that entire information and pick what you want to learn first. Maybe for you, the first chapter is not irrelevant, and maybe you like the third one. So feel free to begin with the third one and come back to the first one whenever you need. Of course, when you do this technique of chunking, you always need to review the entire topic and make sure to not be stuck on one part and always connect them together. Not to learn only a single subdivision of the subject. Throughout this learning process, you also need to look at all of the core subjects. At a broad picture of what you are learning and trying to connect it all by learning something in detail and then moving on to the next thing, till you learn everything. By using this technique, you will take a long time since your brain will not have made any connections yet, and it will have to broaden every single new thing that you will learn. As for if you use some chunking, you will be able to already and prior knowledge, you will be able to expand on multiple things simultaneously in your line of learning. And in that way, everything will make more sense to you. You will understand better. And since your understanding is higher, your learning time will be lower. Moving on to the foundational techniques of learning, which are active learning and passive learning. Passive learning is the devil, but it is also quite useful. We almost always have to go through a little bit of passive learning before entering active learning. Passive learning is a simple topic which could be explained in you simply consuming information, data, without actually doing anything with it. Simply getting more and more and more of information inside of your brain, not even trying to memorize it, simply hoping for it to be memorizing. This could translate itself in you watching videos, in you sitting and passively listening to a lecture, in you reading something and simply highlighting it. This passive learning may help you a little bit, but it will certainly make you miss a lot of information. But let's say that now you've done a little bit of passive learning. Well, now you have to move on to active learning as quick as possible. And in the active learning, there are multiple things that come in play. One of the most valuable of them is teaching. You could also be using flashcards, some quick memorization. You could also be writing or applying the knowledge that you've just was exposed to. One of the most known techniques of learning is the Feynman technique. And it goes from learning about the subject, learning a little bit about it, then teaching it to others. And from how you taught it, come back, get some feedback from your teaching, and strengthen your weak knowledge. The path from nothing to being the teacher is quite a long way to go, and is not that easy. And only through passive learning you cannot become a great teacher, at least not with a small amount of time. Elaborating on this process, from after the prior knowledge till before the teaching, you have to use a lot of ways to quickly understand and learn that information. You could use some mnemonics, for example, if there are a few points that are not that related to the entire topic, and simply learn them fast in that way. Personally, I'm using mnemonics quite often, or I'm trying to connect some kind of term with another term that is similar, but which makes sense to me. By making sense of the information that you are presented with, you will be able to understand it way faster. Before reaching the teaching, which of course is not the highest point, because what you are reaching for, this teaching itself, it's simply sharing what you've learned to others in a way that is easy to understand. You can afterward master this topic and then teach it to anybody in a perfect way. And before I forget, about teaching itself, you can get taught by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And one way will not be the best for you. And by seeking multiple sources of teaching, you have high chances to getting that topic, that knowledge explained to you in a way that you perfectly understand. And if you understand it very well, you will learn it very fast. And coming back to the process of learning, you also need to be proactive in it and go into discussions, seek questions and explanations all of the time, and getting help either from the books, the resources that you have access to, from artificial intelligence such as ChatGPT, or from other people, maybe some friends that have more knowledge than you in that topic. Of course, while viewing multiple sources, make sure that they are real and that they're truthful. And everything that you learn, try not to simply memorize it, but to explain it to yourself. You can also go through this entire process with a group of friends, but in that way, make sure that everything is organized and that you will not simply waste your time with others doing some other activities or talking without any point. If you will follow all of these points, you are already off for a great start. But now let's move on to more advanced cognitive learning strategies. I'll begin with the concept of interleaving. You may not have heard of it at all. but it is rather simple. It relates to what I said already earlier, and to use the interleaving method, you simply need to go and learn about that specific topic in multiple dimensions and connect your knowledge, all of it together. If you're starting from zero, you already have to know what will you reach? What is that 100%? And as I said already, chunking all of the information and try to already know what you're waiting for and what will be the next themes that you will reach from the beginning. And you can jump from one point to the other. If you already learned some new thing, and then you think to yourself that it may connect with something in the future that you already read, that you already have some kind of prior knowledge, well, you can then formulate a hypothesis and test it out. See if what you think you understand or what you think is the truth is actually valid. Personally, I do that through ChatGPT. Getting a little bit more scientific about the process of learning, when you are trying to memorize things, when you are trying to learn them, you do some coding. You absorb that information in your head, then you process it, and then you export it in your own way, whether it's through teaching or in an exam. And it is very important to do that coding in the right way, because this is the entire foundation of your knowledge. And if you're wrong at that point, your exporting will be false as well. I suggest to do it in a multi-dimensional way. And doing that learning, not only through reading, but also through writing and speaking. With speaking, you can do some teaching. With writing, you can do not simply linear writing and just taking notes, even if they're pretty looking. They most often will not be useful to you. What you could do that will be way more useful would be drawing mind maps. I will talk about these a little bit later. And for reading, you shouldn't simply quickly read the information that you are facing, or just quickly listen or watch a video, a lecture. In that, through that entire process, you should already be trying to create some hypothesis and always create some questions and seek answers for them. A little tip for you is that if those questions are very basic, you can search for the answers of these by yourself. But if you see that these are quite complicated and that their answer is not straightforward to you and that you cannot find immediately in your resources, that's a great time to then seek for it to get answered through your teacher or another way, through some other expert. If you follow all of the strategies and processes that I'm telling you right now, if you do the things right and you're fully focused on what you are learning right now, if you are not in a flow state, you will encounter some cognitive load. You will encounter discomfort. It will not be comfortable. Your brain will not like what you're doing right now. You might seek for ways to escape this, to maybe blast some music or go do something else. But during that time is where your learning will be the most efficient. And so it is important when you feel that little discomfort, to simply force through it. Of course, you cannot do that all day long. You have a limit on your learning, and it can be done the easiest and in the best way if you fix yourself some routines and some specific times throughout your schedule where you are studying, whether it is in periods of 25 minutes, half an hour, or an hour and a half. I would suggest not go over 1 hour and a half without doing any pauses. And if you have heard of circadian rhythms and know your own, then make your study times, your learning times accordingly. Preferably spaced into 4 times of 1 hour and a half throughout the day. For most of you, it will be very soon after waking up the first time, then the second time, maybe half an hour or an hour after your first studying period, first learning period. Then you will have quite a long rest time. And then after lunch, in the afternoon, there will be 2 more time slots that will go according to your circadian rhythm, perfect for learning. During those times, if you actually are actively learning the subject that I already mentioned before, if you are following it, you will be developing your problem-solving skills, which will make you a better learner, and you will be able to connect all of the next information that you will be exposed to faster. You will be able to learn new topics in a more efficient way. But of course, when you're learning, as I said, you already have to be very careful of the resources that you are using, but you also need to be careful about your own thoughts and about the way that you are learning, memorizing things. And try to use that critical thinking of yours, putting everything that you learn in a position of challenge. Try to figure out how could this be wrong? And then if it's not, why is this the truth? And finally, it's time for the mind maps that I mentioned to you earlier. I believe that this is the most efficient method that you can use in order to learn the fastest and gain the new knowledge in a long-term memory. Mind mapping is a very complex topic, and there is a lot to learn about it. Even I am not an expert on it yet. A year ago, I was still taking linear notes. By linear, I mean that you begin from one page's corner and you go to the other corner and simply write all of your notes, all of the things that you think you need to learn, maybe making some small diagrams or anything else. But by doing this, you don't learn almost anything. This is more of a passive learning style. As for mind mapping, you need to actually try to make a mind map. Try to connect all of the subdivisions of that topic that you learn together in a way that makes sense and in a way where you actually can connect everything without crossing any lines. By everything making sense, creating all of the topics that you need. And this doesn't have to have any structure. And it is best if you do it on a tablet where you could use an infinite page and expand as much as you want. Because if you do your mind mapping on a page, you might find yourself being limited in the amount of space that you have. And remember that mind mapping and making this map is not a quickly done activity. You will have to go through multiple drafts before finalizing and getting your final mind map. A mind map, if you would get a mind map in which if you would get a single look, you would be able to remember everything that you learn in this and be able to explain all of the relationships between all of the topics, how they make sense, what are they, and basically all of the topic that you've just learned. Now, I know that some of you may not have a tablet that you can access, and maybe you just have some paper. That is not a problem still. Doing your mind maps on paper is still better than linear note-taking. And maybe you will not get all of the benefits because you will be limited by some space, which is unfortunate, but that is the way it is. But you still will be able to do most of the work, and if you do the things right, you will be able to place your entire mind map in a closed space. Moving on to help and collaboration in learning. Often you will need someone or something to help you understand something, to learn. And there are plenty of resources that you can use, and you can get that feedback or get those explanations from your peers, for example, from some experts. You can also go on the internet and search for answers there in maybe some forums, or simply go and watch some videos, go in the comment section, ask your questions there. You can also simply ask your teacher. I'm saying all of this because in order to reach a mastery of a topic, you need to be challenged and you need to get feedback on the knowledge that you've acquired. Get it tested, get it challenged, and in the same time, fill all of the holes that you have in your knowledge right now. Because it is very probable that there are still things, some topics in which you are weak at, in which you've missed some details, something that you not yet know. And by being social, or at least broadening the sources that you're using, you will be able to get a better mastery of what you are learning right now. And again, I want here to give the crown to ChatGPT. For the last 2 years, I've been using this tool, and I have to say that if you give it the correct prompts, and if you train yourself to study with such an artificial intelligence, you can boost your learning by a lot with this tool, and you will not need to take anyone's time. You will simply have an expert by your side at any time, and you can tell him to explain you a topic in so many ways. In the same time, you can already explain it, everything that you know, get some feedback from that, ask him to formulate some questions and to answer these, or simply tell him your hypothesis that you've formulated, search for answers if these are true. I'd say that ChatGPT, as of right now, is already a perfect tool for learning. And I can't even imagine what it will look like in a few more years. Moving on to a quick topic of metacognition. Metacognition is simply the art of reviewing your own learning process, your own thoughts. After every single time that you have to teach, that you have to export the information that you learned, you need to collect feedback from this. And with the feedback that you've collected, then change a bit your learning strategies and implement that new knowledge of learning that you gain. Maybe something did not work for you. Maybe something did work well for you. By doing that constantly, your learning will not cease to improve. And this is a treasure that all of us should seek. Now, I do admit that this process, this protocol of judging yourself all of the time is not easy. But you don't need to make it complex as well. You can simply create a table or keep track of your successes. Keep track of the time that you spend to learn something, and keep track of what the outcome is. See if you've learned what you needed, if you became a master in a way that you wanted to. Moving on to the challenges in learning. Unfortunately, learning is not that simple. And even if you already have all of that knowledge on how to learn efficiently, on what are the best ways to learn, you still need to get in this place and learn. And entering that step is not always that easy. Procrastination, in fact, is a very common issue nowadays. And even I suffer from such a thing. When I mention procrastination, it is very often connected to deadlines. And deadlines are actually a great thing. You can use them in your own way, and by using them, you can add a little bit of healthy stress to yourself. And by fixing some earlier deadlines to yourself, you will be able to learn some topic faster. And in that way, travel further ahead. One of the best measures that could counter your procrastination issues is simply stepping in front and starting to learn, maybe for a minute, for 2 minutes, for 5 minutes, and then stopping. If you already have made that first step, coming back to learn will be already much easier. As I said before, you also should fix earlier deadlines that are before the official ones, and already learn everything that you need before in time. By fixing yourself all of these deadlines, you will fix yourself some kind of a schedule, and you will be forced to learn some time management. And a very important thing to understand is that your time management should be on point when learning. And it doesn't matter how good your skills are, if you leave too much information for the last day, you will not be able to cover it all, to memorize it all. You may get a very high degree of prior knowledge, but if you're tested on a very deep level, that will definitely not be enough. But you can do some cramming. And let's say you enter that procrastination and you leave a month's worth work of learning for, let's say, 3 or 2 days, or maybe even 1. well, if you leave it for one, you don't have a lot that you can do. But in cramming, there is always a procedure that you should follow. First of all, you need to simply figure out what are the main topics. What will be the things that you actually need to know, that you will be challenged in? These will probably be the majority of what you need to learn. So first, figure out all of these, and then begin your learning. And when you've learned all of the biggest things, use the leftovers of your time on the details. Of course, do not overstimulate your brain with information. If you already see that you have too much to learn, sometimes it is simply better to skip all of the details and leave yourself with as much of the big things that you need to learn. If you do not do that, and if you simply absorb too much information in a too short amount of time, you may risk a cognitive overload, a burnout. If you do that, you will have to recover, and nothing will be of value from it. Don't be afraid to admit your weaknesses in learning. And maybe you're not disciplined enough yet to take off an entire topic to learn right now. Maybe the best that you can do is 15 minutes. Well, then do these. Maybe the best that you can do is 5 minutes. Do that. And by constantly forcing yourself to do at least a little bit of that thing, you will be able to build off of that, gain consistency in it, and improve drastically at a point where you will reach easily the amount of time that you need to study, to learn. And when you reach those milestones, you can include some sort of a reward system. But if you do so, make sure that it is random, that you do not always get a reward, because if you do so, if you do always get a reward, you will start seeking for it and trying to find some shortcuts in the journey to it. At the end of the day, you risk to simply skip the entire journey and get to the reward immediately, finding some reason why to get it now and why do you deserve it. Something that is even stronger than reward, it is the fear of something. Make sure to figure out what will happen if you will not learn. Create yourself some horrible situations in your head, and that will push you even more. Of course, this is not that healthy, and if possible, try to not do this. And even if you do everything that I said here, you will still not be able to learn everything in one time. You will need to repeat this process over and over again if you want that information to get ingrained in your brain. You will have to do some active recall. Try to recall what you've learned. Try to apply it a lot. And when you will reach that deadline, you will feel some sort of a stress. And remember that stress can actually be healthy. This mindset of believing that stress is healthy actually is proven that will give you benefits to your body. It will make you more focused, more able to learn. You're cognitive, your mental state, your brain will have a higher power than usual. And I'd suggest to gain interest in what is about to happen. Be actually curious how you will be challenged about your knowledge. And be happy with how it turns out. And improve if needed. And in fact, always strive for improvement, no matter the result. I see that a crucial part of learning has been left out of this video by mistake. I would highly recommend seeking for that piece of advice about learning in this other video that I've made earlier. You can check about that advice in the description of that different video. Thank you for listening to this one. I hope that you will be able to become a learning master.